Built during the 1st century CE and originally called the Flavian Amphitheater before they gave it a way better name, the Colosseum stood as a monument to the power and gravitas of the Roman Empire. Events at the Colosseum entertained the masses in Rome, often featuring elaborate spectacles. Details from Roman gladiatorial combats, mock battles, and raucous celebrations are full of wild accounts of unusual and unexpected happenings at the Colosseum. Over the centuries that followed, the massive amphitheater was repurposed in even more surprising and, very often, unconventional ways. Because when you're extremely wealthy and extremely bored and extremely morally flexible, there's all sorts of things you can do with a great big stadium. So, today, we're taking a deep dive into the most extreme things that have transpired within the circular walls of the Colosseum. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, leave a comment and let us know what other ancient structures you would like to hear about. All right, Romans, are you not entertained? Roman emperors put on mock sea battles in the Colosseum to entertain crowds. During the dedication of the Colosseum in 80 CE, Emperor Titus held a sham sea fight, or naumachia. Historian Cassius Dio, writing about a century later, retold the story of the time Titus filled the Colosseum with water and brought in horses, bulls, and other domesticated animals taught to behave the best they could in H2O. He also brought in people on ships who engaged in a kind of sea fight. The water was fairly shallow, pumped in via aqueducts from the Tiber River. So the small ships had flat bottoms, and the Colosseum had a hydraulic system and network of channels that allowed water in and out. Writing about these kinds of vicious spectacles, poet Martial cautioned spectators not to be fooled into thinking it was the real ocean. I hope that this naval battle with its ships and the waters that represent seas do not mislead you. Let me point out that here just now was land. Apparently, his fellow spectators were extremely gullible. He went on to point out that the sea would be drained as soon as it was time to go back to ground-based games. You do not believe me? Look on while the seas weary the god of war. Wait one moment and you will say, here just now was the sea. Nobody bring Marshall to a David Copperfield show. As staged battles that pit gladiators against animals from Africa, Europe, and Asia, venationes featured man against beast in the most literal sense possible. Elephants, lions, panthers, hippopotamuses, and bears were transported to Rome for the events. Not all venationes were man versus beast, however. Sometimes Romans put 2 or more animals into the arena and let them fight it out. PETA really wasn't a thing back then. According to Roman historian Suetonius, Emperor Titus exhibited 5,000 wild beasts of every kind in a single day when he dedicated the Colosseum in 80 CE. Martial indicated that up to 9,000 wild and domestic animals were killed at the events surrounding the Colosseum's inauguration. Wait, domestic animals? Like goldfish? Cassius Dio similarly wrote about Emperor Trajan's spectacles from 107 CE, during which some 11,000 animals, both wild and tame, were slain, and 10,000 gladiators fought. It's not entirely clear when it happened, or if, but some scholarship indicates Christians were martyred at the Colosseum for refusing to renounce their faith. Later stories tell of St. Ignatius of Antioch's martyrdom in the Colosseum around 110 CE, a fate the devout Christian accepted with enthusiasm. It's likely that Christians were executed in the Colosseum during the Roman Empire. Crucifixion, exposure to wild beasts, and burning individuals were all practiced, but it's not totally clear whether the condemned's religious beliefs factored into their punishment. In other words, it may not have made things any worse. Or better. Ironically, during the mid-18th century, Pope Benedict XIV consecrated the Colosseum to prevent more damage to the structure. In 1750, he put up a large cross in the middle of the Colosseum and placed an inscription on the building reading, "The Flavian Amphitheater, distinguished by triumphs and spectacles, dedicated to the gods of the heathen in unholy reverence, purified of unclean superstition by the blood of martyrs." He wanted something with a little more oomph than, "Ben was here." According to Pope Benedict, any remnants of paganism had long since been washed away by the Christians who lost their lives in the Colosseum. The Stations of the Cross were also set up inside the Colosseum to allow Christians to participate in the Way of the Cross in recognition of Jesus' passion. It was a pretty big change from the kinds of events they normally held there. Gladiatorial combat wasn't always deadly, or even meant to be, but bodies definitely hit the floor from time to time. It is difficult to know exactly how many gladiators perished in the Colosseum, but research indicates only 1 out of 10 gladiators was slain in a fight. Russell Crowe should have had a lot more rematches, is what we're saying. Speaking of the movie Gladiator, the real-life Emperor Commodus really did descend into the amphitheater to face off against other gladiators. As Cassius Dio put it, "He used to contend as a gladiator. In doing this at home, he managed to kill a man now and then. He sliced off the noses of some, the ears of others, and sundry features of still others." He is the emperor, so you can't exactly give him a red card. The Roman author made it clear that Commodus dressed in elaborate clothing and jewelry, soaking up the cheers from the crowd as he entered. Then he would take all of his garb and garments off to begin his exhibition wearing only a tunic. Ah, how modest. Evidence suggests that the Colosseum stopped serving as home to gladiatorial combat and other forms of entertainment during the early 6th century CE. As the Middle Ages progressed, the structure became home to something else: people. In addition to functioning as a place where medieval individuals lived, the Colosseum was also where they worked. Artisans had workshops and stables that housed animals, while part of the arena served as a common area. According to archaeologist Riccardo Santangeli Valenza, Rossella Rea, director of the Colosseum, told The Telegraph in 2014 that excavations revealed an area of housing from the late medieval period. It was then inhabited from the end of the 9th century until the 14th century. People lived there for a long time, is what we're saying. But during the 12th century, just one powerful family took possession of the Colosseum: the Frangipani family. Once the Frangipani controlled the Colosseum and the surrounding area, Pope Innocent II took refuge there to avoid the hostility of his rival, Anacletus II, who was simultaneously elected pope by a rival Roman faction. Gotta love that pope drama. The Colosseum exchanged hands several times through the rest of the 12th century. The Frangipani lost and recovered the Colosseum, often using it as a place to take refuge and to provide safety to others. The Annibaldi family, a major enemy of the Frangipani, asked Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II to compel the Frangipani to give them half of the Colosseum. This occurred in 1227 CE, but in 1244 CE, Pope Innocent IV officially claimed the Colosseum as part of the Holy See. According to some sources, the Colosseum was the site of a celebratory bullfight in 1332 CE. They had every other kind of fight there, so this isn't exactly hard to believe. Held to honor a visit from King Louis of Bavaria, it was an especially deadly affair, based on what contemporary Lodovico Bonconte Monaldeschi wrote about it. His account of the events appears in the form of a fragmented diary, in which Monaldeschi stated that 11 bulls and 18 people died at the event. That seems like too many of both. While skeptics assert the story is apocryphal, we do know that during the 17th century, Cardinal Paluzzo Paluzzi Altieri degli Albertoni, nephew to Pope Clement X, sanctioned bullfights in the Colosseum. This was supposed to be a 6-year arrangement, but the backlash was so intense, the effort was abandoned. When you picture gladiators in pop culture, you picture Kirk Douglas, Russell Crowe, Paul Mescal, and other grizzled men. But gladiators weren't always men. According to Suetonius' Life of Domitian, the emperor held gladiatorial shows at night by the light of torches, and not only combats between men, but between women as well. Cassius Dio describes Domitian's nighttime gladiatorial shows as ones pitting dwarfs and women against each other, like WrestleMania. Because members of the elite classes found gladiators from all genders to be intriguing, they were known to train and dress up like them. Cassius Dio wrote that, "Men and women not only of the equestrian, but even the senatorial order appeared. They drove horses, killed wild beasts, and fought as gladiators, some willingly, and some sore against their will." Pope Nicholas V reportedly had more than 2,500 cartloads of stone hauled away from the Colosseum in 1452 CE. He wanted to use the travertine, a type of limestone, to make lime for building St. Peter's Basilica. When Pope Alexander VI leased the Colosseum as a quarry, the papacy gained a lucrative revenue source. Builders pillaged everything they could, hauling away stone, iron, lead, and bronze to repurpose for a fee paid to the church. There was nothing illegal about taking materials from the Colosseum. Pieces of the monument had been chipped away and used for other purposes for centuries. Often, earthquakes and other natural happenings caused damage and made loose stones easier to access. It's going to waste otherwise, just piled together in a Colosseum shape. It was never a fully realized goal, but Pope Sixtus V hoped to provide work for all the poor in Rome and save them from begging in the streets by putting them to work at a wool factory in the Colosseum. Ideally, Romans would work at a shop on the bottom level and live in the area above it. Pope Sixtus's ideas were part of a larger plan to make Rome safer, help ease transportation, and reduce trade congestion. Wider streets, additional roads, and efforts to move water about the city were carried out by architect Domenico Fontana. But Sixtus passed away in 1590, and the wool factory never came to fruition, so they put a Burlington coat factory there instead. Citation needed. So what do you think? Which of these unusual Colosseum events was the craziest? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.